This is the Academic Survival Podcast, and I'm your host, Dr. Chandra McDonald. Statistics show that approximately 40% of students drop out of college every year. In fact, nearly 30% drop out their first year. Well, I am on a mission to improve these stats.
Yeah, and also like sometimes some teachers aren't really good at explaining certain topics, but your friends might be better. For example, like I can clearly remember back in when I was doing Calculus 3, right? Calculus 3 is a very 3D oriented class, right? So you have these mathematical equations that model 3D objects, right? You have like the X, the Y, and the Z plane. And for whatever reason, it just came very naturally to me, right? But some of my classmates, they struggled with that. And the teacher was moving so fast in class, they couldn't keep up. But because we had studied, we always studied and prepared for exams as a group, that concept, I would go and like break it down, like how to think about it. And because I had more time, I could break it down and take it slow versus the teacher, right? So, and the same thing happened for me. For example, like when we were doing physics too, right? There are certain concepts of electricity and I really struggled with it. But I had friends who were planning to go into electrical engineering. So they taught me, helped me understand where my gap was.
That's mechanical engineer Mamadou Diallo explaining the importance of study groups. Join us as we dive into the world of engineering. We discuss the Engineering Career Pathways Institute, the different disciplines in engineering, and key habits that successful students develop to maximize their learning potential. Stay tuned. Welcome to the Academic Survival Podcast. Today I have with me Mamadou Diallo. He is an engineer, and I am so excited that you agreed to come on the podcast with me today. How are you?
I'm doing well. Glad to be here. Excited to be on here to talk about engineering and hopefully share something that will be beneficial.
Yes. So can you start off by telling me what school you went to?
So I went to the University of Maryland, Baltimore County. Short name is UMBC. And I studied mechanical engineering there. Actually, I went to two schools. I started a community college. So I went to the community college of Baltimore County. I got my associate degree in engineering science. And then from there, I went to transferred to finish up my bachelor's degree.
All right. So did you know coming out of high school that you wanted to be an engineer all along, or was it, did you pick a major and then switch majors? How was that for you?
No, I did not know at all. As a matter of fact, I really didn't know what I wanted to do with my bachelor's degree. Well, after high school, I just know that, of course, I was always drawn to medicine, but usually a lot of students want to go to medicine. They want to do something like biology, which I wasn't interested in. So I was on this dilemma. And so when I graduated high school and I didn't know what to do, I decided to go to community college. And actually, I did general studies for my first year of college. And I took classes in my interest. So history, math. I explored career paths. I didn't really have that guidance going out of high school. So I explored, and then I enjoyed solving challenging problems and concepts, and eventually I saw this thing that was engineering. I was like, oh, what is it? It seems very cool. It seems very hard. It seems it's going to test me. So I was drawn to the challenge of, doing something that appeared difficult, and because I know it would make me a better person, a better individual. So from there on, I went down the rabbit hole of engineering and trying to do pre-med at the same time.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So it was interesting. So then, so basically I started the engineering curriculum my second year of college to get my associate degree. It was tough. It was hard, but I liked it. And also it was while taking pre-med classes as well. So when I got my associate degree, I had the option of, well, I had the option of doing both, but I was just so interested and in love with engineering. I told myself, listen, if I ever want to do pre-med or take the MCAT, I can always do that. Let me just focus on engineering and see how it goes. So yeah, when I transferred, I focused on just mechanical engineering. I graduated, started working, and I've been enjoying it so far.
All right. So, did you have any stumbling blocks along the way in terms of engineering? Did you ever feel as though this is too hard? I need help, or did you have to ever get tutoring?
Yes, I think honestly one of the hardest thing was, of course we always talk about diversity and things like that, but when I looked around classmates, teachers, and even, when I went to career fairs and things like that, I never really saw people of color. So it was just predominantly, led by, so I, I didn't really see a lot, and I wasn't really sure, is this for me? Am I doing this right? Why? I don't
Mm,
see anyone, I couldn't really see anyone who I could relate to or work with. So it was kind of hard,
mm.
but there were a few black students here and there, and we worked together, studied together. Of course, we had also everyone in there, but it was kind of hard. That was honestly the hardest challenge. That feeling included, when I saw engineering,
Mm.
the precision engineering. So that was definitely hard. It was harder than the
Wow.
curriculum itself, to be honest.
Really? You're I have a friend who has an engineering background, and he said something similar, that being in that space and people really not expecting him as a black male to be in engineering was harder for him than the coursework, because he was really really good at math. So,
Hmm. Yeah.
and so with you, you experienced something similar. Were you able to find a mentor, someone that you could follow, that maybe not necessarily on campus, but somewhere in life? Were you able to find a mentor?
Huh. Hmm. To be honest, no, I, you know, like in terms of engineering mentor, honestly, no. I'm fortunate because so I did have support and I'm so grateful for that, right? So for example, in community
Mm-hmm.
college, there was Laura Lemire. She was the dean of the she was the director of the engineering program at the community college, and they had this program to help people of color, and people from underprivileged backgrounds, to support them in STEM, right? So there was like this scholarship
Mm-hmm.
program. It supported students who were doing engineering or computer science, or IT, so things like that. So she, we would have a get together, and she played an important role because also, you know, when I was in the process of getting my associate degree, and I was still doubtful that I could do this because I couldn't really see other people who look like me doing it. She helped me
Mm-hmm.
get an internship, you know, with a company that was locally that was recruiting. When I got there, I started working, it made a huge step because it allowed me to get around other engineers and what they do and say, oh, okay, well, I could do this as well. It's not as complicated. It's not as complex. So that was a very, very important step. And then when I transferred, it was really just working with and studying with friends that made the biggest difference.
Mm. Yeah. So basically, sounds like having that support group of like-minded individuals trying to go down the same path
Hmm.
provided you a little bit of love along the way.
Hmm. Absolutely.
I know that there's different types of engineers. Tell me about the different types and how you ended up choosing mechanical engineering.
So there's mechanical engineering, and mechanical engineering is focused on on motion. So like any materials, any vehicles or structures that involve movement, mechanics, mechanical engineering focuses on that. And then you have electrical engineering that focuses on electricity, the use, converting electricity to another form of usable energy, or providing electricity, making electricity accessible, or basically powering devices using electricity. So electrical
Mm-hmm.
engineering focused on that as a basis. And then of course you had computer engineering. Computer engineering focuses on hardware, so like the devices you need to build computers, but also the software, like the programs, like, if you think about like Windows is a software program, right? You need
Mm-hmm.
Windows to run your computer, but you know, if you have Windows, you don't have a computer itself, can't do nothing either, right? So you need both pieces. So computer
Yeah.
engineering merged the two. And then you have, beyond that, you have more disciplined fields, but
Mm-hmm.
honestly, all the other ones are subspecialties of that. So for example, like if you look at aerospace engineering, aerospace engineering
Mm-hmm.
focuses on, airplanes, aerodynamics, or space, but really they apply concepts of mechanical engineering, because
Right.
airplanes are
It's
moving
got to
objects,
move.
right? So
Yes.
like it's a subspecialty of mechanical engineering. And then you'll have like electronics engineering, which is a
Mm-hmm.
subspecialty of electrical engineering, but for smaller devices. Because if you think about it, there's electricity in your phone, right? The phone uses electricity, but it uses small devices. So you have, because it's such a complex system, it has its own specialty, right? And then also,
Okay.
if you look at the electricity in your house, right? That's also electricity,
Mm-hmm.
but you have two different electrical engineers working on it. So
Oh, wow.
yeah. And then of course there's agricultural engineering, and then that's its own specialty. And then you have, yeah, that's its own discipline, agricultural engineering. And they
Wow.
they employ a lot of science and chemistry, because they usually work with the earth, right? With the environment,
Mm.
rain, like composition of the soil, the health of the plants, or they may make tractors, build tractors, but there's also
Uh-huh.
mechanical engineering there.
Yeah, yeah.
hmm
What about civil engineering?
I
Was
was
just speaking to. Oh, you were
no,
getting
I
ready to
was
get to
about to
that?
go
Okay,
there.
go ahead.
Yes, yes, I was about to go to civil engineering.
Yeah,
Then
I have I have a coworker whose son wants to become a civil engineer.
mhm.
So, yeah, so could you tell me a little bit more about civil engineering?
Yeah, well, then there's civil engineering, which civil engineers play a very critical role in our infrastructure and our world. But if you think about it, engineering as an ecosystem, everyone plays a role. So civil engineers, they build structures that shelter, that provide service for humanity, or for things. They just focus on building structures. So buildings are designed by civil engineers. Roads are designed and built by civil engineers. Bridges are designed and built by civil engineers. Yeah, and within civil engineering, you also have the structural engineering. And the structural engineers, they focus more so on the supporting structures, right, that hold the building in place. So if you think about like
Mm,
your house, you have walls that are there, but if those walls get knocked down, you're fine. Really, the house is gonna stay standing, right? But then there are
ah,
certain pillars that keep the building up. If you knock those down, the whole thing's gonna crumble. So
yeah,
structural
it has to be
engineers,
structurally sound.
yeah. So structural engineers focus on the foundation and the ability of the structure of the building to support the load that's going to be on it. So they have to estimate,
Right,
how what is how much load is this building expected to carry in its lifetime, right? They have to
right.
calculate what is the likelihood of an earthquake happening, and if
Uh-huh.
so, what is the magnitude of that, right? And they have to take that into account as a load as well, right?
Wow.
But they're also civil engineers. And then I actually found out another specialty of civil engineering, which is garage restoration and parking. So
Yes, yes. I heard that episode on your podcast.
yes.
Yes.
So I didn't even know that was a thing, but that Nick, that's his specialty. He studied civil engineering, And so that was a specialty. So you have all these niche disciplines, right, within the larger discipline. So yeah, how that gives you
Yeah.
a great overview of it.
Yeah, that's really good. Now, when there was that building that collapsed in, was it in Florida? It was like a condo
Hmm.
and several people lost their lives. Was that a was that a mechanical engineering issue, or not agricultural, but like, so you've got structure, you've
Hmm.
got mechanical, like what happened to your knowledge, if you know anything about it?
Yeah,
You know,
I
what's your assessment on what failed there?
yeah, I looked into it. There was also a bridge, I think in Delaware that collapsed last year as well in the fall.
Oh yeah, I
So
remember that.
yeah, so I look into these things because I'm interested in them. But so for example, what happened in Florida, it was more so like it was a structural issue. I think there was negligence, couple parties. So
Mm,
like of course, you know, I don't remember how old that building was, but there's at some point, there's supposed to be whoever is in charge of maintaining the building is supposed to have quality and structural engineers to come in and inspect the building and look at the foundation and see if they notice any cracks and things like that. And if they do, they're supposed to do something about it, right? So that's where that idea of maintenance comes in. So now,
mm,
in this case, I don't remember if they noticed signs of the foundation wearing down and they decided not to do anything about it, or if they never caught it, which in case they never brought in the people who's supposed to inspect it, right? So either
mm.
way, it's things like that happen, and usually they happen when you don't have proper quality and maintenance systems set in place to prevent that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so these are just all the different things that somebody with the engineering background
Mhm.
can be involved in.
Yeah, and even
Um,
sorry to interrupt. Even if you think about like even in a building, right? It's not
mhm,
just a building is civil engineers might build the building, but you
mhm.
need mechanical and electrical engineers to make it functional, right? You need
Right. Like the
electrical,
elevators
the
and
elevators, but power,
yeah.
right? You need the power that you're going to use in the building, that the load, the amount of power needed, you'll need electrical engineers to make those calculations and make that design aspect. So when
Mm,
you design in that building, you'll have the civil engineers that and the structural engineers that design the foundation. They design, okay, this is where the concrete is gonna go. This is how much concrete we need. This is how tall it's gonna be. And then they'll take that, they'll pass it on to an electrical engineer, and then electrical engineer is gonna go, okay, well, if we have this many people using it, and we're gonna need refrigerators, we're gonna need air conditioners, we're gonna need water heaters. Okay, this is how much power you need, and this is where you put the wires and things like that. And then beyond that, you'll have the mechanical engineers. The mechanical engineers, they design the water system. So like the water that you have in the building, how much power you need to that, what kind of water boilers you need, the pipe size, where to lay them out, you know. The mechanical engineers, there's HVAC engineers. So HVAC is heating, ventilation, and air conditioning. Those they
uh-huh.
are mechanical engineers, and they do that aspect of it. So they decide how much heating and cooling is needed in the building, what kind of air conditioners need to buy for that, and things like that. So it's an ecosystem, and all the
Yeah.
disciplines need each other to make things functional.
Yes, absolutely. I I I never looked at it that way, but absolutely, it's an ecosystem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. So as a freshman in college, 'cause what advice would you give to a freshman in college in terms of sticking through with the discipline, or even selecting which type of engineer they would want to be? What advice would you give a freshman?
Man, all right, that's a loaded question. So in terms of just selecting a discipline, I would highly encourage students to try to see if they can shadow someone, right? Or maybe start working on, okay, figuring out maybe, okay, what mechanical engineers do, and looking at that and trying it out, you know. And I would just say just look it up, see what they do, and see what you're leaning towards. And also, what I want to tell them also, listen, it's not like it's not written in stone. Like it doesn't seal your fate. So let's say you go with mechanical engineering, and
Mhm.
and or you realize on something. It's okay. There are mechanical engineers who work on electronics, right? You have mechanical engineers that work at Apple building phones, right? Working with electronic
Mm.
engineers. So oftentimes it's the experience that matters, right? So whether you
Mm.
go into, so I work, some of my colleagues are electrical engineers. I'm a mechanical engineer, but we all work together and we all work on the same systems. We all work on the same devices. So so don't overthink it too much, right? But
Okay.
understanding the basic foundation is important, because when you do mechanical engineering, for example, at least for me, I decided to go with mechanical engineering because it touched on all the other disciplines. It touched
Mhm.
on electrical, it touched on software engineering, it touched on, of course, aerospace engineering, it touched on civil engineering, right? You have to do structural analysis as a mechanical engineer. So it touched on everything. And I felt like from there on I could be able to go into whatever my interests lie, right? So yeah, that was my approach. I forgot to also mention there's industrial engineering as well. Sorry, they
Oh,
just keep
okay.
coming. There's industrial
That's
engineering.
a
So industrial engineers also, they build machinery. So like in the plants, right? If you look at in these big plants where they may be making cars or things like that, you have industrial engineers in there. You have manufacturing engineers in there. So it's unlimited. But to go back to your question, freshman year is very important. I think that's when you really should try to build some really, really good habits. I would say take some time and learn how to learn, right? Learn how to
Mm.
study fast, because that's going to be your most valuable asset. Learning how to study and and understand concepts quickly is critical, because the information is so vast and the classes move really, really fast, and you have to be able
Mm.
to keep up. And so you knowing, and here's the thing, there's a reason why some people learn faster than you. They're not smarter than you. It's just because they have, for whatever reason, by chance or by intention, they learn how to learn. They learn
Mm.
methods that allow them to quickly retain a lot of information, whereas you didn't. So
Mm.
you can be better at that. And if you can be better at that, you'll be better at all the subjects that you learn in class. So
That is such good advice. Learn how to learn. That is so good.
yeah, so that would I would say that there's like a doctor, there's someone like with a doctorate in education. I can't think of his name right now, but he 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 has a concept of this, and like he has advice and tips, and he even have like these exercises to help you improve on that. Maybe I'll see if I can find it and send it to you offline.
Yeah.
But it's very helpful. It's very critical. What else? So there's that. Really learning how to learn is critical. And then beyond that, implementing those learning habits, you're gonna need them throughout college. So the sooner you started, the better. You know, doing that, and then also having good study buddies. I
Yep.
don't know anyone who survived engineering school by themselves. It doesn't
Mm.
matter how special you are. And I'm sure this can be applied to other courses as well. When you'll see like pre-med and at least med school students, they'll learn together, study to learn together.
Mhm.
And that way, what happens is, if we all
It's
have,
like creating an ecosystem. It's
yeah,
an ecosystem for your learning,
yeah,
right?
yeah. And also,
Mhm.
like, sometimes some teachers aren't really good at explaining certain topics, but your friends might be better. Like, I know, for
Ah.
example, like I can clearly remember back in when I was doing calculus 3, right? My last year of community college, we were taking calculus 3, and calculus 3 is a very 3D oriented class, right? So you have these mathematical equations that model 3D objects, right? You have like the X, the Y, and the Z plane. And for whatever reason, I understood that vectors, it just came very naturally to me, right?
Okay.
But some of my classmates, they struggled with that. And for
Hmm.
whatever reason, they couldn't comprehend it. And the teacher was moving so fast in class, they couldn't keep up. But because we had studied, we always studied and prepared for exams as a group, that concept, I would go and like break it down, like to how to think about it. And because I had more time, I could break it down and take it slow versus the teacher, right? So,
Yeah.
and the same thing happened for me. For example, like when we were doing physics too, right? There are certain concepts of
Mm.
electricity and I really struggled with it. Um, but I had friends who leaned more towards that. And actually, they were planning to go into electrical engineering, right? So it
Hmm.
made sense. And I was going to mechanical engineering. So it made sense for me to understand that. So they taught me, helped me understand where my gap
Mm.
was. So that's why it's so
Yes.
important. So I would say critical.
That is such good advice. Wow. Okay, so you're with being a mechanical engineer,
Mhm.
what are you working on right now that's exciting for you?
I'm working on things online and also like at work, but then also personally that I'm very excited. So,
Is there anything that you could tell us?
okay, well, I can't go into specifics, but if you're familiar with the concept, I guess R&D, which is like research and development. So one
Uh-huh.
of the projects I'm working on at work, is we're working on this project to basically help. I can't tell the company's name. I'm sorry, but it's basically it's to really help. It's an entity with the government to help them really improve the speed at which they're doing certain things, right? And like it
Okay.
has huge impact, just monetarily, but also just in terms of the survivability of that branch.
Okay.
so so it's very exciting to see that because again, you oftentimes when you see these huge projects like an airplane or something like that, you wonder, wow, how did it happen? How do you get from start from nothing, just a thought to here? So
Mm-hmm.
having the opportunity to work on that and being involved on that, and seeing a project of that scale to work is always amazing, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then offline, there are certain things, certain aspects, of my development now. I'm a technical project manager, so I don't always get to do the nitty gritty, but because I
Mm-hmm.
like to do that and like to develop myself individually, I have projects at home that I work on. So currently I'm working on building like a conveyor system for a plant, but I'm doing it my own way. So like I'm learning, I'm reinforcing some of that learning in school, some of that learning at work, right? And I'm doing it at home, and it's very fulfilling. And I'm getting to apply and develop certain parts of my engineering knowledge that for whatever reason, because of my role, I can't really use at work, but I want to still
Mm-hmm.
use them. I want to develop them, right? So I'm
Yeah.
doing that. And that's also another thing, you don't have to feel like you have to always do it at the job. If you really
Mm-hmm.
care about it, you can do it offline and still get as much fulfillment, right? I want to build things. I have young kids. I want to build like drones with them and things like that. And I'm working on that.
Oh,
So it's fun, and I'm still learning, right? You think
right.
that it's done, but it's really not. So yeah.
Wow. That's so special. You want to build drones with them. Like
Hmm.
that just tickles me because for me, I'd just go buy one. So that's awesome.
Yeah.
Wow. So what about what oh my gosh, your kids must be super smart. What about your like any type of mentoring? What are you doing now? Are you at all helping people who are interested in engineering?
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, I do the Engineers Hub podcast where I bring
Yes, tell
on.
us about that. Tell
Yeah.
us about your podcast for engineering. Tell us about the programs.
Yeah.
What's
So
going on?
so yeah, so the Engineers Hub podcast started really out of that need again. If you remember, I told you earlier, I wasn't really it was very isolating going through engineering school,
Hmm.
and sometimes felt alone. So what I ended up doing was after I graduated, I was like, you know what, I'm gonna do something about this, so because I wish I had seen other people that look like me doing engineering. So I was
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, you know what? Now that I'm in industry, there are people like me doing engineering, but you don't really get to see them. So I want to give them an opportunity, give a platform where we can showcase their brilliance and hopefully in the process inspire other maybe high schoolers or other students right now in college who are doing engineering and maybe they feel isolated to let them know, they're not alone. So
Right.
it started like that. That was back in 2019, summer 2019. Or was it? Or 2020? I don't remember anymore. So I did that for 2 years and I got really, really good feedback, right? And I'm barely doing any promotion, but the numbers are growing. People are finding it.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
the crazy thing is people are listening to it all the way to Australia, like
Oh, yeah.
yeah, they're listening in the US, Canada, in Central and South America, in Europe, in Africa,
Uh-huh.
like everywhere. All the continents,
Yeah.
there are people listening to it. So I'm like, wow, there must be a really big need for this. So I kept doing that. And then, of course, beyond that, I wanted to do more. So then this is where I um, started the Engineering Career Pathways Institute, which
Yes.
is basically the
Say that
institute.
again. Say that again.
Engineering
Engineering.
Career
Uh-huh.
Pathways Institute.
Okay.
So the institute, so the Engineering Podcast is part of the institute now, but the institute has really three core missions. One is again bridging the gap between the standard engineering curriculum at university and
Mm-hmm.
the needs of the industry. So one thing also, this is a big gap because engineering students will come out of college and they don't even and it's really hard for them to adjust because they don't really know anything about the workplace and they have to learn again.
Mm.
And one thing I also noticed is there are students or engineering majors who will drop out because they get an internship or they get a job right out of school and they really hate it. Like,
Mm.
for example, I had a friend, who was in mechanical engineering and we had the same internship, but, he still graduated, but eventually, he was like, it's not really for him. Now, I don't know if he just had a bad experience, going out like in the workplace or for whatever reason. So he does something else now, even though he graduated with a mechanical engineering degree.
Mm-hmm.
But there are cases like that as well. So like there are students who are dropping out of engineering because of that. And I'm like, well, no matter what your passion is, no matter what your interests are, I guarantee you there are engineers involved in it. So like
Mm.
if you don't have to work on airplanes if you don't like working on airplanes. You don't have to work on something that you find boring. If you want to, if you're into music, guess what? You can revolutionize music by maybe designing a better recording system or building something that helps facilitate people, maybe people who want to listen to music, right? Think about the iPod,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
The
Mm-hmm.
iPod, the iPad, right? Well, the iPod was an MP3 player, right? So there's always something for you, no matter what you like. If you're into boats, if you're into airplanes, if you're into cell phones, if you're into gaming, if you're into whatever you can imagine. I don't know what's the niches out there, but whatever you're into, like there is a place for you. So one, we want to bridge that gap, right? And we want to
Mm-hmm.
showcase all the available career pathways in industry to students who are doing engineering or interested in doing engineering. So that's one of our pillars. And the other pillar is, well, I mentioned it. So one is bridging the knowledge gap. So
Mm-hmm.
figuring out what industries need and then showcasing that to students. And hey, this is the skills you need beyond your standard curriculum. These are the
Mm.
certifications you need. This is how you get them. It makes a big difference. Showing them the options available. And then third, improving, increasing, contributing to the diversity of the engineering workforce. So how we want to do that is by making all the resources we have available to students of underprivileged backgrounds, and also developing programs that will help them be ready for the engineering curriculum, if they go in there. So like give them the skills they need in terms of math, physics, and all the other disciplines. Make sure they're ready for that, right? Not make things easier for them, but give them the resources they need in order to be ready to compete, right? So yeah, that's the Institute's goals that I launched it last year, December. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so right now we're in the process of just I'm working with a couple of universities to see how we can improve things for their students who are majoring in engineering.
Right. Yeah.
And also actually earlier this week, I went to the satellite show in Washington, D.C., 2020 satellite show. I had the opportunity to work with a couple of very big and important, I guess, companies that are making satellites, making devices for space exploration, space travel,
Mm. Mm-hmm.
and working with their team. So seeing also how we can expose space industry and things like that to students, like it's not just
Yeah.
it's amazing what you can do. So yeah, that's it right there. So that's what I'm doing, mentoring. So it's a lot since I have a job as well, full time job that I do outside of this.
Yeah.
But yeah, we just
Wow,
keep it
that's
working and improving.
I love it. When I was in high school, there was a exam that we had to take to kind of like help you figure out what would be a good career path for you.
Mm-hmm.
And when I took the exam, it said civil engineering.
Hmm.
And I was like, I don't know what that is. I didn't know what it was.
Mm-hmm.
Um, when I would ask, I didn't get any explanations that made it any clearer to me. So a program like yours would have been fantastic for me to be able to plug into, say, hey, I got these test scores back. It's pointing me in the direction of civil engineering.
Mm-hmm.
Can you help me out? I'm not really sure what this is.
Yeah, absolutely. And I believe that's really the key. I don't think we need to push any kids to go into engineering that aren't passionate about it. But I really think there are so many kids out there who, if they just knew it was there and it was for them, they would go right in, without any hesitation. And I think it's just exposing them to it, and like not making it foreign for them, you know?
Hmm.
So,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. I don't know that based on my math skills, I don't know that I would have ever survived.
Now you certainly would have. It's you certainly would have. It's
the the only math, actually my favorite class in all of high school was geometry, but that's it. Like I loved geometry, and to me geometry didn't feel like math.
I think it's
And
probably
then when
because
I
you
got
understood it very well, right? And it was intuitive and it made sense.
It did. It made sense. As a matter of fact, like I said, my favorite course in high school was geometry, and my
Hmm.
favorite class in college was logic. And so for me, the proofs in geometry felt very much like the logic problems that we had to solve in my philosophy class.
Yeah, I mean, I'm serious. My older sister, she was always so afraid of math. But when she, went to college and she took college algebra, she aced it because like, I helped her study, but I just like, she had to overcome the fear of it, and get tutoring and get
Hmm.
help. And she loved it. And it was like one of her best classes. And it's really just like a fear. And of course, bad teaching doesn't help, you know?
Yes.
So
Bad teaching doesn't help. And then also speed, right? There's this idea that if you can't do it quickly, then you're not good at it.
yeah,
And
absolutely.
that's one of the things. It's like, maybe someone just they can get to the right answer. They just need to get to it. They just need a little bit more time. And then over time, they can get faster at that part. But yeah, if you just wash out at the beginning because you can't keep up, it's really unfortunate because you just don't know what genius lies behind that that person's process. You just need to give them more time.
Yeah, absolutely. And even that, like, it's also like there's such a thing as really like a learning style also. Like, for example, I'm grateful I'm at a point where I know now like what works and what doesn't, right? So I'll give an example. So right now I'm on a trajectory to get my professional engineering license, right? Which opens up new doors for me. But it
Mm-hmm.
requires, of course, it requires a certain number of years of experience, and you also have to take the fundamental of engineering exam and pass it,
Okay.
right? So last year
Yeah.
I was preparing to
This is
take,
this is something good that students need to know. Okay,
hmm
continue.
yeah. So I was preparing to take the fundamental of engineering exam, and I was like, wow, I've been out of school so long. Maybe I definitely need a refresher in certain concepts, right?
Mm-hmm.
Certain classes that who maybe made me sweat. I need a little bit of help on there.
Mm-hmm.
So I signed up for this program, right? It was supposed to be like I think 3 months, right? And it was
Mm-hmm.
like Mondays and Wednesdays, 3 hours long, right? And then there were all these
Mm-hmm.
problems you had to work over the weekend, and it was just so structured. And when I started taking the class, it's like just PowerPoint, and like the instructor was just flying through topics, flying through problems, not really breaking it down. And
Mm-hmm.
a part of me felt like, am I stupid? Like, what's going on here? I don't really follow this.
Right.
And and then I realized, okay, well, this is not the teaching style for me. So I dropped out of it. And
Mm.
and I went back and I reviewed the exam and what I had to study, and I built my own schedule, right? And I built my own program of studying and schedule, and I took it and I passed it the first time, right? It's
Mm.
like 5 hour exam. It tests you for everything you learn in college, right? For mechanical engineering. I took it the first try. I passed it, and I learned it. I took my own pace and like focused on what I thought I needed instead of like
Mm.
that. So sometimes, you know, students may feel like that with certain teachers, right? Like certain teachers, they have genius. Or if you, like you mentioned, if you don't understand
Mm.
it quickly, you're dumb or you're stupid.
Right.
No,
Right.
like that's not always the case, right? Especially for me, I really like learning. So for example, right, if we're learning a subject, right, and we get halfway through it and like I see this really, really cool concept that I don't understand or I want to explore, I want to pause and really break this down and go back to the root and understand how I get there before I move on. And so what ends up happening is, let's say if someone else is teaching that class and I may get stuck here trying to understand this and they just keep moving. And then later on,
Mm-hmm.
I'm so far behind, I'm just like, there's no point, you know?
Yeah.
And that can happen. So as a student, sometimes you need to understand that. And, if that's the case, you shouldn't internalize just because you don't understand how someone's teaching. And the crazy thing is this happens even in the professional world. People will come to you with certain things that don't make sense, but because
Mm.
they have that, you have the expectation that you have to get it right away. You feel dumb or stupid for not getting it. But when you look
Mm-hmm.
at it, you're like, oh, well, actually, this doesn't make any sense. And you have to have professionally doing so, as a
Mm-hmm.
project manager now with clients, they'll come at you with certain things and you have to tell them, hey, this doesn't make sense, and it happens. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, there are learning styles, and understanding how you like to learn is very important. And if you feel stuck, like for example, when you're in college, you don't really have an option to really tell the teacher, hey, you need to pause, but I would say that's where your friends come into play, like again, the study groups come into play. They help you how to learn.
Mm-hmm.
They help you overcome certain things and you keep going, but don't let it, just because you understand a concept, it's not because you're dumb. And just because you're scared of math, it's probably because you liked it at some point and then maybe the class started going too fast and you lost track, and then for the rest of the time you felt like crap sitting in there because you couldn't follow what was going on, and you
Right.
internalize that. No, I would say like just go back and trace the roots, and if you need to take your time certain things, take your time certain things. That's okay.
That's good. That's really good advice.
So it
Wow.
took me 6 years. Like, I just want to put that out there for some students.
Okay.
Like, it didn't take me 4 years to get my bachelor's degree. It took me 6 years, right? My first year I was doing
Yeah.
general studies, right? And
Mm-hmm.
then it took me 2 years to get my associate degree. And then from there on, when I went to UMBC, it took me 3 years because my first year I paused. I was interested in environmental engineering as well, right? So I
Mm-hmm.
explored again. So I
Mm-hmm.
explored, and then I went back to mechanical engineering and I graduated. And lo and behold, I'm here. I'm, still as successful, and I'm still exploring. I am still exploring. Let it be known.
Yes.
I'm still taking courses offline, learning to build drones and things like that. I don't know what the future has in store, but
Mm-hmm.
I know that, I'm leading towards my passions, and
Yes.
yeah, so keep that in mind as well. You're not racing it against anybody, right? Like, this academic and learning career is not really, you're not racing against anybody. You gotta do what works for you, and that's okay.
That's great advice. That's great advice. Okay. So, as we head toward the end of this conversation,
Uh-huh.
tell us where you can be found on social media, or what links, like how do we find you?
So I'm on LinkedIn.
Okay.
If you look for Mamadou Diallo, probably see me. I'm
Okay.
usually on maybe like third or fourth search on there,
Okay.
and you
And
should.
then your podcast, how do they find your podcast, and then
So
your other program?
so the podcast, you can find it by going to engineershubpodcast.com, and then from there
Okay.
on, you can listen to it on Apple or Spotify, or it's on all the major podcasting platforms, Google. So
Mm-hmm.
you can find it on there. And yeah, from really LinkedIn, and there, you can find those two platforms. And then for the institute, it's engineeringcareerpathways.org. So engineeringcareerpathways.org, and you can learn more about it there. So yeah, I'm also on Instagram. I've taken a pause on it, but I'm on there
Okay.
as well. So pathpaver underscore Diallo is my acronym. So you
Okay.
can find me on there as well.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Mamadou. I'm so glad that you were able to join. You dropped so much good advice, so many good nuggets in this episode. So I'm excited to share it with the students that are listening to the podcast. So thank you very much, and I will be back in touch with you soon.
Absolutely. Glad to be on here. So thank you. And, I think, I like what you're doing, and I think this is awesome. So yeah.
All right. I'll see you soon. That's it for today on academic survival. If you want to share your story on how you survived your freshman year of college, you can reach me at info@chandralmcdonald.com. We'll be back next week with more ways to survive your academic journey. Until then, happy studying.